5, 6, 7, 8.
Hello everyone, welcome to the EX Podcast episode number 6. My name is Stephen Vincent. I've started this podcast because I believe that companies have to think of themselves as employment brands if they hope to attract and retain talents. Let me ask you a simple question. Are you excited to get up every day and go to work? Well, consider this. Only 30% of the workforce feel engaged at work. That means for the other 70%, well, work kind of sucks. And yes, we all get it. Engaged employees are good for business. But why companies are not acting on it? After all, employees are the first ambassadors of a brand. Engaged employees foster innovation, deliver higher customer service, and bring creativity to the organization. In short, they are more productive. This podcast brings a different lens to the employee experience, a brand and customer experience angle rather than a traditional HR angle. In our episodes, we cover multiple topics that touch and impact the employee experience, like the key components of a positive employee experience, or office space design and its impact on the company's culture, or the employee journey map, and how design thinking, collaboration, and innovation are intertwined. We also talk about employer branding and employee engagement tools and measurements, or the place of technology in the employee experience. Today's guest is Steve Pruden, Senior Vice President of Human Resources at Appirio, a 2,000-plus employee global company that creates both worker and customer experiences through technology. Today we'll talk about the worker journey map, the worker communication, the worker engagements and measurements, the technology and remote workforce, and how employee experience and customer experience are intertwined. And we'll learn about what is Appirio's Worker Experience Tool. This episode is brought to you by Mold, M-O-L-D. Mold is a full-service brand agency that works with artists, writers, and creatives to help its clients increase sales, book more gigs, and boost audience engagement. Its creative team of graphic designers, videographers, writers, and brand managers work together to make sure that every time a client's name is seen or heard, it shines. Find out more at themoldagency.com. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you get a chance, please make sure to review the podcast on iTunes. You can open the iTunes app and type in Stephen Vincent or EX Podcast, and you will find us there. And last thing, if you want to send me feedback, suggestions for future topics or guests, you can reach me at svincent@exsummit.com or on Twitter at @EX_summit. All right, let's get to it. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the EX Podcast. Very excited for today's guest, Steve Pruden from Appirio. Steve is the SVP of Human Resources. Appirio has a very unique take on how to create both worker and customer experiences through technology, and we'll get the chance today to dive into this topic. Steve, thank you for being with us today.
Great, very, very nice to be here. Excited about it.
You've got an interesting background and evolution at Appirio. You started on the consulting side, right? And then you moved into strategic and operations roles.
Yeah, that's
moving
right.
to human resources.
Yes.
So tell me a bit about your current role and how Appirio creates worker and customer experiences.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. I have had a non-traditional journey to leading HR, and definitely not a HR practitioner by trade. And I think that part of that is really what led me to joining the HR team and ultimately obviously helping lead that, which is how do you craft a unique branded experience for the employees, from the start of their journey, let's say the recruitment or the hire phase, through the end of their journey with you, maybe the retire phase, and how do you establish that brand? And so that's what kind of brought me into that. And I think having a diverse technology or an operational background kind of gives me a unique slant to it. The Appirio tie-in to this is, Appirio really believes that, at the core, what a business should focus on is the relationship between their customers and their workers. And we talk about something called the virtuous cycle, which is the better you take care of your workers, they will then take better care of your customers, who will then take better care of your shareholders and your revenue and your profits, which then you can reinvest back into your workers, and that cycle continues. And as you feed that cycle, your business will grow and expand. And Appirio has been doing that, since we were founded about 10 years ago. And that's really the key central theme of our go-to-market messaging is when we are implementing technology, we're looking at that technology. How does it impact your workers, or how does it impact your customers, so that we can get our customers and our clients to feed that virtuous cycle.
So what through Appirio does, how do you see worker and customer experience intertwined?
Yep, so they are very highly related. At Appirio, we are a technology services company, and so our people, that is our revenue generating engine. That is the thing that influences and most touches the customer. So for us, we know that if our workers have a great experience, if they are, if we're keeping the unnecessary stress down in their day to day, we know that they can spend more time, get more results for our customers, and our customers see that. When we show up on site to a consulting engagement, they know when our consultants are excited to be there, when they're having a good day. They know when they're succeeding, and they respond to that. We get lots of good survey feedback and lots of good business results on how easy it is for our teams to work with, and we feel like that's a good way to measure the impact of the worker experience and the investments that you're making there. How does that directly influence and impact the customer? So for us, it's very easy to see.
You've been in different roles, right? What's your take? Do you see the worker experience as the same as HR, or is it different?
So I think in the classic sense of HR, it's probably a little bit different. Classic HR, I think, is very operational focused. It's all about managing and containing risks sometimes, where a true worker experience is more about engagement, and it's more about thinking about almost thinking about your workers kind of like a marketer would. You have to. It's probably a good cross section between, or a good relationship between traditional HR, operational risk management, with marketing and thinking like a marketer. And if you can bridge those two things together, I think you can. You've got the start of what you could do to build a really good, thoughtful worker experience.
That's very interesting, because one of the reasons why I've started the EX Summit series and the EX podcast was because my take was that HR shouldn't be driving the employee experience. It's a component of it, but rather the big question I had was organizations typically do a pretty good job at understanding their customers' needs, right? From customer research to customer segmentation, personalization of the experience, and so forth. But why can't they do it to the employee side? Because typically most of the processes and measurements and tools in place on the customer side could be applied to the employee side.
You are exactly right. I mean, I agree with that, and it's one of the reasons why we feel so strongly about what we'll call consumerization of technology that focuses on the worker. For decades, folks have had a great experience with technology, even before things like the iPhone. They've got a remote control for their TV that's very simple and easy to use. Yet when they go to work, they're logging into SAP, or they're logging into a green screen on a mainframe. Fast forward until the mid to late 2000s, and now you have a very elegant designed supercomputer in your pocket that everyone from a baby boomer to a 5-year-old can use. Yet we're expecting our workers to have an antiquated, cumbersome technology or cumbersome process for them to use. And when you can think about the consumerization of the technology that a worker is using, you can really untap the potential in that worker. You unburden them from all of the unnecessary stress and unnecessary process that maybe has been holding that individual back. And I think what we're starting to see is the results of companies that can make that shift, that can think about this. You're starting to see the benefits of that, and so that's one thing that is sort of paramount to why Appirio is even in business.
So, because Appirio is very strong on worker experience, do you have some sort of structure or framework around the worker experience?
Yeah, so we do, and we have an entire worker experience kind of strategic consulting set of services that we would provide to a customer. But really, what it starts with is very much thinking about the worker experience like you would a customer experience. What's the journey that the worker is on? How can you optimize that journey for that worker? So that's one piece of it, and then the other one is really where the marketing side comes in. We look at what's the brand identity that a business stands for? Is it service? Is it integrity? Is it being a disruptive force? Okay. How do those brand elements, how can we reinforce the brand elements in every step of the worker experience as well? And then sort of the last thing that we would look at is the technology that then underpins that. So if we've got the right process, we have the right brand elements from sort of a marketing standpoint overlaid, do we have the right technology to be able to bring the worker experience to the level that we want? And then I would say the last piece of that is you have to measure. And yes. So you want to measure not only the impact on the worker, but also the impact on your business. Because all of these things that I've talked about obviously take money and they take investment. And as a CFO or a CEO is allocating capital for their business, we want to make sure that they see a tangible return on the capital that they're allocating towards enhancing worker experience.
So let's focus a little bit on three main points that you've made. The worker journey map, the employee branding, and the measurement of the engagements. Mm-hmm. So do you have a worker customer journey map identified somehow, or is it more intuitive?
So, I would say that there's not a standard one that every organization should follow. I think that if, this is just my personal belief, is that it's very easy when you start that journey mapping process to shift back into traditional HR norms.
Yes.
And so, I would almost caution people, don't come in with a preconceived notion just yet, because it would be too easy to say, oh, well, we'll just, spool up a new module in SAP and our worker experience is done. It's normally not that simple. So I would say, we don't necessarily have a preconceived notion. I would say there are, themes that we will see. And we obviously don't like to start with a blank slate, but I would caution against having too many sort of preconceived notions or canned ideas of what those journey maps would be. I think each organization is going to be a little bit different. If you are a consulting organization like Appirio, there's probably very similar parallels to that industry. If you are an automotive brand, and that customer experience is going to be a lot different, and therefore the worker experience is going to be a lot different. And so, I think that I would caution against it being too upfront and prescriptive around that first step. Now, I think that there are themes as you dig into the second or the third step that I talked about, of course, that are there. Surveying is one that There's been lots of work over the last probably 50 years on the best way to get meaningful survey information out without overburdening and over-surveying. And that's one thing that I think that typical employee engagement surveys try to do is they try to identify every little problem because you want to solve the problem. But we have a very simple one that we use. We call it fun factor. And we just ask, how many days out of 10 are you having fun at work? And the goal is 8. If you're having fun 8 out of 10 days at work, we know we're probably giving you a pretty good experience. If it starts to get below 8, we should probably talk to your manager, figure out what's going on. But it's still work, and not every day is going to be a joy. You could miss a flight. You could miss a deadline. Something could happen. Of course, that's not going to be a fun day. But we have a very simple way that we like to do it, and obviously we advise our customers to also follow that. But hopefully that answers your question.
So it's supposed to have a very open communication culture, right? If I'm an employee and I feel that I don't have 8 days out of 10 with fun at work, and I go to my manager, it has to be a very candid and no fear conversation, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It would be hard to gauge, are you having fun 8 out of 10 days if you're only surveying your employment population once a year when you do a focal review and a 360 feedback. And so what we practice internally, and we also advise people, is what we'll call real-time feedback. We'll talk about a culture of real-time feedback, and what that means is we want to establish trust between the employee and his or her manager, all the way up and down the chain. And that way, it's relatively easy to have real-time conversations. It can be, that can be something that's more formal, that's tracked in a system, or it could be just a culture of, let's say we're doing a presentation to a customer, and before we walk into that presentation, we know that we're going to huddle for 15 minutes as a group and talk about how it went and how we can improve. If you institutionalize that, it makes it kind of easier to keep a pulse on the worker experience. But it's something that's got to be done consistently. It has to be equally applied throughout the organization. And that's something that's hard for very entrenched organizations that have a very typical standard HR set of policies. It's hard to kind of turn that because HR policy feeds so many downstream activities and things that it is hard to change, a 100,000 person organization. But it's worthwhile to do that because it will create more of a focus on worker experience, and it will let you know where to spend your calories and where to focus.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sticking to the experience journey mapping, have you identified specific stages throughout the worker's journey that Appirio really focuses on? Whether it's the interview process to the end year review to whatever it might be. Do you have a couple of stages that you really focus on through the worker-employee journey? Yeah,
it's it's the standard steps that I think you were talking through. We'll talk about the hire to retire journey. I think that it is some of the themes that we talk through with this is it's fairly easy, or it's very tangible to get that hire journey and make changes to that. It's relatively easy, especially if it's if it's not a entrenched brand. It's pretty easy to shape your hire journey pretty easily, and it's very tangible. You can see it because you can talk to folks that you're interviewing. How was your experience? How did it go? Likewise, it's fairly easy to measure folks who are on the tail end of their employment journey with you, because you have something in the normal course of business that you can very quickly change. It's the parts in the middle that sometimes get lost. And so that's where people talk about corporate culture, and they talk about other things. What we advise during that journey mapping process is to obviously follow through the traditional HR processes that people go through. That could be onboarding right after the hire phase. It could be career progression. It could be succession planning. All of the types of typical HR steps that a human resources team would really be there to help provide an organization. But what you have to do when you think about it from a worker experience standpoint is at each of those steps, what are you doing to make sure that you're meeting the needs of that worker in that specific phase? And what are you doing to reinforce your brand elements at the same time? And so, it's not necessarily about what phase they're in, but it's how you're thinking about the worker journey in that phase. And so, every organization is going to be a little bit different, but that's the framework to follow. It's not necessarily the phase that's important; it's what's guiding you through that phase. And I would say the first part is pretty easy. The retire part's pretty easy. Everything in the middle gets complicated and it gets hard, and so that's where you've got to maintain focus on it. It's got to be part of what you do. The corporate culture piece. A lot of times you will hear corporate culture described as this nebulous thing. I don't think it's nebulous at all. I think corporate culture is how you work. Like, how are you actually getting work done? Are you prompted on time for meetings? It's part of your corporate culture. Are you always meeting face-to-face or through a video conference? Or are you, picking up the phone and direct dialing folks? Or are you communicating via WhatsApp? All right? There's lots of different ways that you could get work done. For us, as part of the worker experience, if you define culture as how you're getting work done, and you're measuring, are people enjoying how they're getting work done, you can start to make very tangible steps to improve the worker experience in that middle section where it's hard. And so I think that's the tie-in between corporate culture and worker experience. Can't be nebulous, has to be very, very focused, and it's how you're actually getting work done. That describes your culture.
Staying on that topic, the technology space is a very competitive space when it comes to not only attracting and retaining customers, but also talents. Mm-hmm. Right? And Indianapolis specifically is very, very competitive in that regards, with so many different tech companies, startups, from huge brand names to very appealing young startups. The employer brand is one way to not only to differentiate mm-hmm. a company from another, but also to attract talents. What's Appirio's take on its employer brand?
Yeah, so we're very proud of our employment brand, and it's something that I think at the start of the company, it was pretty easy for us to establish a brand that was different, because we were pretty different when the company was founded. We were very firmly in the camp of, there's a right way and a wrong way to do enterprise technology, and if you're buying or maintaining a server, you're doing it the wrong way. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of shouting that from the rooftops 10 years ago, way before the term cloud computing was there. And so for us, we were able to establish our brand as being, for lack of a better term, kind of a disruptive force there. But we were only known in small pockets of the country, or maybe small pockets of the world. And so I think what Appirio had to do over our 10-year so far trajectory was how do you expand on that brand, and how do you maintain it in light of lots of competition for talent. And so the way we think about that is this is really where you think about your employment brand like a marketer does. Uh-huh. And you have to look at sort of different channels and then different things that you do to get news to maintain your brand, but also continue to establish a branding identity. And for us, it really comes down to a few things. In a town like Indianapolis, we are increasingly competing for talent that is, they're passive candidates. They aren't actively on the job market. And so, if you are a passive candidate, you have to be able to, or if you're going after a passive candidate, you have to be able to hook that candidate in. And that candidate for us, we're lucky in that we have a great Appirio alumni network that we can draw on. We have a great referral program that we can draw on. But we also have what in web marketing you would consider kind of organic search. So we have, if you are a Salesforce developer at a company and you are trying to find, Node.js, Heroku, something, and you search in Google, probably the first search that's going to come back is going to more than likely be by a guy named Jeff Douglas, blog.jeffdouglas.com. And if someone looks at this, they'll probably see, oh, where did Jeff work? Oh, wait, he got his start in Salesforce at Appirio. Oh, interesting. And then they'll go down again and they'll say, oh, Appirio, I think they're in Indianapolis. And then maybe they want to buy a book on Amazon and they'll look up, okay, let me look at the book on Amazon. Who wrote the book on software development? Oh, this guy, or on Salesforce, this guy, Jason Olette. Oh, where's Jason Olette? Oh, wait, he was chief architect at Appirio. Oh, there's a theme here. And so we're able to get this organic kind of way to establish our brand is if you are the best at Salesforce development, in this case, you work or have worked for Appirio. Great. And then we would move on to the next one, and we would nurture our brand through more of a inorganic way that's still a little bit organic, and that would be on sites like LinkedIn and Glassdoor. So I do think that Glassdoor is something that I was a skeptic. I'm not a skeptic anymore. It's very important for you to have the right employment brand, the right results, that your CEO is highly thought of on Glassdoor. We've been able to that's paid very large dividends for us to maintain that, which is good. And then once you've done that, then you can finally go into, okay, we can reach out to folks because they know our brand. They can read our blogs. They can see sort of what's happened there. We try to expose a passive candidate, especially, to as much of how we work as possible. So we work from anywhere, even though we're headquartered in Indianapolis. If you work in Albuquerque, great. If you've got a quiet place and an internet connection, you're good to go. So we'll spotlight that. We'll spotlight folks that love to travel. Here's Appirio working in Paris. We'll spotlight that on the blog. We'll show that we video conference like crazy. And that you get a new laptop every couple of years. That we have beer in the fridge. All of the things that kind of showcase what it would be like to work for Appirio, and so that's something that we've been able to keep up, and we've been pretty proud of.
It's a very interesting topic to me as well, because on the recruiting side, so obviously on the marketing side, for the past several years, the focus has been on inbound marketing versus outbound marketing, not so much on the recruiting side. Most of the organizations still do sort of outbound recruiting versus inbound recruiting. However, what you just described is purely inbound recruiting. You want people to come to you instead of you getting out and try to get them, right?
That's right. I mean, obviously, we still do lots of outbound recruiting. We've got a very robust global recruiting function, but you have to balance that with very consciously thinking about your inbound recruiting brand. And how are people going to find you? What are they going to think about? What's the journey that someone's on? And I love using that example of the captive Salesforce architect that's sitting at a company that's probably thinking about, I've kind of maxed out here. Mm-hmm. There's no one else I can really talk to about this stuff. Maybe it's someone who's 5-10 years in their career, and she's probably feels like she's a lone wolf. She's going to get help. She's looking online. She's seeing Appirio a few places. Maybe she travels out to San Francisco for the annual Salesforce Dreamforce conference. She sees the Appirio presence there, and she thinks, man, I think these folks know about Salesforce. I think maybe I'll start to look there. If our outbound recruiting does necessarily touch that candidate, she's got brand awareness instantly. Right? And it's brand awareness that's cultivated for her. It's not someone I saw because there was a Accenture shirt on somebody's golf shirt or something during the Masters. I mean, that's an important piece, but that's not the employment brand that we have, because we're going after a different type of consultant in that case.
All right, so let's now switch to the third component. So we talked about the worker journey map. We talked about the employment brands. And so we briefly mentioned employee engagements and measurements. So let's talk a bit more about this one. So beyond the surveys that you send on a regular basis to track how many happy days they're experiencing at work, do you have any other ways to measure employee engagement? Yeah,
so we of course we do. I mean, I think that the most important way that we measure employee engagement is our business results, because keep in mind we live and breathe the virtuous cycle. So we do believe that if our business results aren't where we want them to be, that we should look internally at what's going on with our people first. It's not, is our message falling flat? Are we losing based on competition? Were we outpriced in the market? Sure, those things may happen, but we always look back in, what's going on with the team? And so that's the first way that I would answer that. I think that's the ultimate gauge.
I would say, sorry to interrupt you,
Sure.
I would say because it's in the consulting world, there's a lot of face-to-face interactions between your people and customers.
That's right.
And if employees either feel somehow disengaged or not fully happy or fully committed to work, then it has an impact on the customer. That's
right. It has an immediate impact. You will see things like our hot customer list go up. So we'll have more projects in the red. You'll see more goodwill, right? Because we're not doing the proper work that we should be doing, and we're having to invest in those customers to try to right the ship. You will see the very classic, case that everybody measures would be regrettable attrition, voluntary attrition, things like that. I mean, that's obviously a great metric to look at and stay on top of. Slice and dice lots of different ways. But once someone is left, or they've sort of flipped the switch that they're going to leave, especially in our consulting business, that's revenue that's walking out the door. It's expensive to rehire that person. Shame on us for not providing that person a better experience. And so, that's the other way that we would sort of measure that. Engagement programs, however, don't, directly address those things. Engagement programs, I think, provide more of a holistic view and a more healthier work life for your workers. We have all the standard engagement programs that folks would have, whether it's, things like outsourced sort of metric gathering and profiles for folks to see what their work preferences are. We have ongoing training, mentoring, onboarding. We have what we call centers of excellence, which are sort of birds of a feather type groups that can come together and network on specific topics that are sanctioned by the company. We have nonprofit opportunities for folks to donate time, money, work on cool projects that are outside of work. But I think those are all very important and things that we want to continue to do. But I think that what really serves as an engagement is, it's real-time feedback. It's constant sort of consciously thinking about the experience that your workers are going for. It's talking about it openly. It's being very transparent with what you do as an organization, so you keep surprises down to a minimum. It's kind of the little things that I think really matter. It's for Appirio, and I was a skeptic of this when I joined Appirio back in 2010. At our core, we're a virtual company. So even though we have offices in several different cities throughout the world now, the majority of our employees work from wherever in the world they want to work from. And so how do you build an engaged workforce over the long term if you're not sitting in the same office?
Yes.
And I always thought, there's no way this is going to work. But boy, was I wrong. And I think that, one of the things that Appirio has done, whether through dumb luck or whether it was on purpose, is we are very much a face-to-face type of a culture. And so whether I'm in Indianapolis or I'm in India or I'm in Dublin, when I'm on a meeting with someone, I'm looking at them face to face. So I'm using technology to enable a very immersive meeting experience. And the interesting thing about being a virtual company is you get, once you get in the habit of doing this every day, every single meeting, you get to learn things about your coworkers and your colleagues that you normally wouldn't inside of a normal working environment, because you'll see, oh, this is what, Steve likes to work in his kitchen. And on his kitchen, there's a wall with pictures. And I know his dog's name is this, and so you build these, fairly detailed, complex, healthy relationships with folks that kind of naturally happen, even though you may only see this person once a year. And that's something that, from our CEO on down, we role model every time. It's, when Steve's working from home, he's got a musical instrument behind him, and he always has a hat on, because he's not going to get his hair looking good in the morning, and that's just the way it's going to work. And so that, I think, creates it's just more reinforcing how you like to get work done, reinforcing the culture that you want to put in place, and it's trying to build sort of engagement with your employees during that middle section of their life cycle. I think engagement programs are extremely important. They're extremely helpful, but it's that more intrinsic pieces of how an employee engages with their employer that really, really matter for the long term.
It's a very interesting statement, because, again, many companies see technology as a barrier to personalization of the human experience, right? And also the ability to work remotely somehow as well either breaks the culture or breaks the collaboration or communication between employees. And what you just said is completely opposite.
Right. Yeah, it's it's one of those things. I think Appirio is lucky in that we have a fairly progressive modern technology infrastructure. So we don't have typical barriers that maybe a less progressive company would have. If you take let's say you are an employee in a highly regulated environment that hasn't invested in world-class technology infrastructure for the last 10 years. They probably would never have the luxury of that experience that I just described, because if you think about the experience that worker is going to go through, and we'll bring it full circle because it talks, this is the consumerization of the worker experience. If they have to open up a laptop, and let's say it's running, an old version of Windows that has a bunch of security stuff on there, it's going to take a long time to boot up. It's probably old, so the battery doesn't work great, so they've got to get their charger out. Okay. Then they have to log in. They have to authenticate to a remote hosted in somebody's data center domain controller, which is going to take time. Then they have to VPN in, and hopefully they've got their token so that they can do it. All right, now we're probably 10 minutes into this thing. They're probably frustrated. They'd rather just close the laptop and go back to bed, or go do whatever. The Appirio experience is totally different. It's, first of all, we don't care what your computer is. All you need is a modern web browser, and we don't have a VPN. So if you can connect to the internet, wherever you are in the world, you're good to go. And you don't even need your computer. Just use your phone. And just bring your own device. So I don't care what kind of phone you use either. And so, the experience for that worker on the Appirio side is just so much more convenient. And it's funny, when you're used to it, even though I was a skeptic in 2010 when I started, coming from traditional enterprise IT, I could never go back. Because think of all the hurdles, like what I just described is what most of our listeners will probably feel every single day. And I haven't felt that for 10 years. So technology is a big component of this as well.
How many employees work for Appirio?
We've got probably just under 2,000 globally now, and those are scattered across the U.S., Europe, kind of headquartered out of our office in London, in India. Our largest employment population in an office is in India, and then in Tokyo, Japan. We also have a small but growing office and capability in Australia as well.
So you have a global workforce, right? So we talked a lot about the company's culture, but how do you scale up the company's culture across different cultures?
Yes, very, very hard. And I would be lying if I said we have it all figured out, because I don't think we do. I think that there are, what we try to do is be very consistent in the Appirio culture and how we work. So if you are in Indianapolis, or you're in Dublin, or you're in Jaipur, India, how you work is the same. Your tools are the same. Your processes are the same. The policies that we try to follow as a business are similar. The employment brand that we build is very similar. So consistency, I think, is very key. But there are cultural differences that whether they are geographic based, or there could be cultural differences based on certain customer segments that you're going after as well. Especially in consulting, a lot of times you got to follow what your customers are doing. And so, we just try to be conscious of those. I think that the fabric of the organization, the sort of the cultural pillars that are there, is what sort of grounds you together as an Appierian, even though you may be geographically dispersed. Where it gets tough is if you're acquiring a company, that compounds the problem. If you are building something from scratch in a new geography, a lot of the ways that you get through that, there are some well-worn paths that you can follow, that we follow as well. It's getting the right general manager or the right team on the ground first, making the right first few hires. It's doing all of those basics, but I would say that's definitely not easy. We've had our host of stumbles through that process. I'm sure my colleagues in other parts of the world would say the same thing. But it's something that we definitely try and we try to stay on top of.
Yeah, when we talked earlier at the beginning of this podcast about open communication, clearly in Asia, it's much more challenging to have open communication with your manager versus in the US, where it's much more informal. That's right. Yes, so you'll find that in Japan. And you'll also find that there are geographic differences in sort of basic HR items. Let's say you're expanding in a part of the world that has a high rate of inflation, and so those employees need very predictable pay increases just to maintain their standard of living. Where a place in the U.S., that's really not what we do here, right? It's more pay for performance, maybe a little bit more cutthroat in certain areas. And so, you have to make sure that you can localize what you're doing to meet the needs of that employment base. But the things that we want to try to maintain, even though we may push the envelope culturally, would be complete transparency where we can. Culture of real-time feedback, even if it's a little bit painful. We don't want to push the envelope too much, but we do want to make sure that it's consistent where it can be. The customer focus, trying to be humble in what we do. Those things, you just got to work hard to make sure that they're consistently applied. Right. And when they're not consistently applied, that's really when we've had problems. All right. So when we get together before this podcast, just to prepare, we talked briefly about the worker experience tour that Appirio is launching this year. What is it about? So it is this is our second year doing this, and it's a free event that we're doing all over the world. I was just counting it up. I think it's in 11 cities. So starting April 26th, and then it wraps up, I think, in the end of September in San Francisco. But whether it's Atlanta,
Boston, Tokyo, Paris, Sydney, Stockholm, London. We're hitting a bunch of different cities. And what we're trying to do is, and the whole sort of premise of this is that there will be some of our customers, there'll be industry experts. We've got Forrester and BuzzFeed coming as well. And what they're really going to be talking about is the return on investment that comes from investing in worker experience. So, I think that the premise of this virtuous cycle, I think most folks get. They understand, well, sure, of course, especially in, certain service industries, it's very easy to see. If you're in retail, if you're like Appirio, you're in consulting. If you're, a car dealer, it's very easy. But what we're trying to do is to show when you invest in this is the return that you can actually get. And you can bank on that return if you do it right. So that's the theme of the Worker Experience Tour this year. Like I said, free. And what we're trying to do is showcase how leading organizations do this, how they put it into practice, the results that they get. Forrester's actually going to be releasing some studies that they've done that'll show that ROI. And then we will, since we're a technology company, we will showcase how technology supports this. It's a great set of events. It's like I said, going on. This will be our second year doing it. We had a great turnout last year, and we're looking for an even better one this year.
Where can we find dates and locations for this tour?
Yep. So you can go to www.appirio.com. There'll be worker experience links right on the front page. You can also email at cloud@appirio.com. And we'll be happy to make sure that we get information in the hands of you if you'd like to join.
Awesome. How many people do you expect, roughly?
So we have sort of three different tiers based on the cities that we're going to. Some of the top tier locations like San Francisco will be measured in the hundreds of attendees, so it'll be fairly large. If it's a smaller location like Stockholm, it'll probably be more intimate, called 20 to 25. So it's not so large that you feel like you're not able to really engage, but it's also not small that you're the only person sitting there listening to a sales pitch, because that's not what it is. This one is really about what is the return that you expect to get, and putting that return, making it very tangible.
That's awesome. I mean, I really enjoyed that conversation. We're getting close to the end now, but typically at this point, I like to ask our guests more intimate questions so that our listeners can get to know our guests a bit more personally. I've heard that you like to drive race cars. Is that right?
Well, kind of. So it's not for insurance purposes. It's not racing. It's high performance driving. But it's a fun hobby that's based here in Indianapolis, obviously the racing capital of the world. It's a hobby that I've been fortunate enough to get involved in over the last few years. That starting actually this month in April, and then running to kind of the end of October. At any chance I can get, you'd find me on a local racetrack, trying not to break my car, because I am my own mechanic as well. So if I run into something or misshift and break something, I'm the one who's got to fix it. But that's one of my hobbies. It's a lot of fun, and it's a good way to I would say decompress from work, because when you are driving a car at 130 miles per hour, heading into a turn with 4 other cars around you, you can't really be thinking about anything other than what you're doing then and there.
Stressful, work or driving?
In that case, stressful. Definitely the driving, but as you get more experience, it gets less and less stressful and more fun.
What car do you drive?
So it's a Porsche 911, and it is hopefully it stays together for one more season.
What are the most memorable trucks that you've driven on?
The most memorable one for me would be of course, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I got to do that last year. Looking forward to doing it again this year. The Grand Prix road course that they did when the U.S. Grand Prix ran here, and it's just a very special place. Anyone who's into motorsports, I think that is one that they put on their bucket list to be able to do. And I always consider it. Most racetracks are kind of like going to the county fair. We're going to Indianapolis. It's like going to Disneyland. It's very, very professional. They do a great job, and we're lucky that they've let amateurs like me run our cars on the track.
I would say the same. I came here. I came to Indiana when I was in my 30s, and that was my first time at the IMS for F1 course, race, and I was like a child.
Yes.
Big smile from one ear to the other, and just like a dream.
Yeah.
It's an awesome place.
It is. It's a fun place, and it's a great hobby. You meet lots of good people, but it's also a lot of work if you're trying to do it on the cheap like me.
All right. So we talked about the Appirio's website and get more information about the work experience tour. What are the other ways to follow you guys on social media?
Yeah, sure. You can find us at we've got Facebook, Twitter. Just search for Appirio. You'll be able to track us down. We do have a couple great blogs, from tech blogs to more employee kind of culture blogs. If you want to see what worker experience is like for us, you can check those out. blog.appirio.com. But yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. Or if you're in Indianapolis, San Francisco, London, Dublin, Tokyo, Jaipur, look us up in your local directory or Google Maps, and walk on in an office. Well, I'm sure we'd be happy to host you.
All right, and look for dates for the work experience tour.
That's right, exactly. Yep, check out the worker experience tour. You can get to that from our website. We do actually have a little microsite for that too, that I'll mention right here at the end. It's WXTour, WXTOUR.appirio.com. So if you don't want to weed through the website, you can go directly to it.
All right. Well, thanks, Steve, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Stefan. This was great.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the EX Podcast. If you want to learn more, you can visit our website at exsummits.com to find out when our next events are. You can also find my manifesto on business to employee or B2E branding at b2ebranding.co.